All right, can you folks hear me okay?
Again,
Great. Call the,
no, I can't.
cannot. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you.
No, I can't. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. All right, it is call the F&A committee meeting to order on June 7th at 6:30 p.m. Let's see, any additions or comments regarding the agenda? See none. If there's no objection, we'll take the agenda as approved. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved. Let's see, Councilmember Christensen, because I can't see you very clear, you're in a sort of a small window for me. If you would just give me some kind of audio cue if you are raising your hand, then I'll make sure I don't miss you, if that would be all right.
Will do. Alternatively, I can hop on the Zoom link and I'll just leave my video off and I can use the raise hand if that's easier.
Either way, that'd be great. Whatever works for you there.
I'll hop on the
Thank you. All right, let me just see if there are any are there any members of the public present in the council chambers?
No, there are not.
Okay, there are none. I'm looking online. And I see no attendees. So seeing no members of the public, we will move on from public comment. To approval of the minutes. We have minutes for the meeting of May 3rd and May 17th. Are there any comments or corrections from committee members on the minutes? All right, hearing none, if there are no objection, then we will take the minutes as approved. Hearing no objection, they are so approved. Moving on to the claims approval report. Are there any questions or comments from committee members regarding the claims report? All right, hearing none, if there are no objections, we will take the claims report as approved to move to the full council on the consent agenda as required by our rules of procedure. Hearing no objection, the claims report is so approved. Moving on to agenda bills, AB 22-090 regarding Snoqualmie personnel policy revisions. I would open to, rather than ask for a presentation, this appears to be relatively straightforward. Unless committee members would like a presentation from staff, are there any questions or comments regarding the proposal? Right, I have just a couple. And I see Mr. Sturbank, you're there, I assume, to answer questions. Fantastic. My first question is on, I just have two, on section 2. Is the entire section 2 new, or I just wasn't clear from how it was marked. Is that new or is that existing?
The entire section 2 is not new, but the underscored language is new in the policy. So of 2.33, for example, and what we are doing there is carrying the requirement into the policies from the Mayor Larson's vaccination and masking directive.
Got it. I apologize, Mr. Sturbank. I asked my question poorly. I guess I'm asking it poorly. I'm confused about the section numbering now. There's a section 2 implementation on page 7.
Okay, so yes, that is new. And the intent there, I think there has been some conversation about this in the past. And this possibility or this topic, and if I can back up a moment, just in general, this entire resolution is a bit like the financial policies that the committee is considering, in that this is the first step or tranche in a number of changes that the administration wants to discuss with the committee. As the resolution outlines, I think, or the staff report, the policies haven't been comprehensively examined in about 10 years. And so there are a number of things needed to be done to bring them up to date with federal and state law and rules and things that relate more to the in the weeds kind of day-to-day administration. There are things that, as in here, major policies that should be folded in. There are other pieces about wages and things that will require additional council attention. And so, similar to the way the council and committee handled the remote work or telecommuting policy a year or so ago, the resolution essentially adopted a policy, said we will have that delegated to the mayor, the authority to work out the details and put that into a policy. And so the intention with section 2 here is to capture those things that are really nitty-gritty day-to-day operational stuff, delegate that authority to the mayor to make those types of policy amendments going forward, while carving out the things that are traditionally and legally in the council's bailiwick: employee wages, compensation and benefits, creation of new positions, prescribing the duties and qualifications, compensation of officers. All of those things are in the remain in the council's authority. And those are some of the pieces that the administration intends to bring back future amendments in those areas for council consideration, along the lines of retention bonuses, retention incentives, negotiation of severance agreements, L&I reimbursement rate matters, things of that nature. And so this section 2 is the first step there in that conversation.
Yeah, that's what I thought was happening. It's just that it wasn't underlined. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. I think that you've done a fantastic job with this document of implementing exactly the conversations that we've had previously at this committee, and even some more broadly at council, of delegating to the administration those things that really don't require council involvement. And so I just think you've done a fantastic job here. I couldn't be more supportive of this. I did have a question there in this section. There's some specific areas that are the way this sort of lays out. It says it delegates to the mayor or city administrator, if so directed, the ability to make personnel policies to implement all of this. And then it carves out a few things. It says, but these few things that are carved out need to come back to council. So there's one thing in that, which I think is a fantastic approach. The one thing that wasn't in that list that I thought maybe should be, and I'm interested in your thoughts, if this was intentional or just or not, which is requiring council approval for changes to compensated absence time. In other words, I thought that should be mentioned as one of the things that should be carved out and have to go back to council. But
so you're speaking of leave, paid leave, for instance?
Yeah, any kind of compensated. So whether that's changes to sick leave, changes to vacation time, any other labeling we might put on some form of compensated absence.
And I will say just broadly, this paragraph was is a first take on the language for this discussion. So we haven't had the opportunity to just sort of vet the detailed language. But I tend to think of paid absence or paid leave time as one of the benefits that are offered employees. And so when we say wages, compensation, or benefits, that type of program that you just described would fall within that.
Yeah, I thought you might be thinking that. I sort of, I can see that.
But certainly you, council and committee, may want to add more language on the skeleton here. That's certainly the council's prerogative.
So not sure what other committee members think, or it doesn't sound like there's any difference in viewpoint here. So my thought would be to add into that list where it starts with policies that increase employee wages, compensation or benefits, and so on, to add in a specific item, changes to compensated absences. Does you guys think that's a good addition? Not necessary? Any thoughts? If not, if there's no objection from administration, then I'd ask that we add that
No objection.
language.
I'm agreeable.
So whose responds on that? Is that you, Mr. Sturbank? Is that something you'll take back then and amend?
Yeah, yes, I would. Pending the committee's direction in terms of whether the committee wants to see this again or move it forward, subject to that direction. There is on a related, perhaps, topic, and maybe this is your next question, but a section in the policies adds Juneteenth to paid holidays, but it also includes the vaccination incentive payments that are similar to those that were previously included in the policy the council adopted and in MOUs with some of the collective bargaining agreements. And in that incentive is a booster, an incentive payment for booster shot. And we did in internal conversation want to add some clarification that is a one-time incentive for boosters. At this point, it's unclear how many boosters the CDC may ultimately determine are necessary, and we just wanted the policy to be clear that that's not going to be a rolling annual additional incentive. So we would.
All right, and so you're
would include that, and I could include this clarification that about which you just spoke in bringing this forward.
So in a revised version, regardless of whether we first see that at full council or see it again at this committee, what you're saying is in a revised version, both the item I raised and then the item you just mentioned, some clarity around that would be added. Is that right?
Correct.
That sounds great to me. I don't have any objection. Committee members, any comments or questions on that?
No.
Okay. There's one other item. There's another item. The other item I wanted to raise, and then I just have a question, is related to section 1.3.2. So the additional language here just isn't a policy statement. It's an administrative statement of how a policy is to be administered. And so it seems to me that this should not be part of the additional language, should not be part of a policy, but I'm guessing you guys thought this through and have a reason you think it does need to be part of the policy. I just couldn't figure out what that would be. So maybe, in other words, my thought is I'm supportive of this requirement. I don't think the council should impose it. I think we should allow that to be done by the mayor or the city administrator, and sort of not. I don't think this needs council. Right.
It wouldn't. I agree. Probably independent. If the council were to have first adopted that delegation that's in section 2 of this resolution, this is the type of policy amendment that likely the mayor would have then just handled or adopted herself. This language was put in here because the existing policies do have EEO language in them. because we were folding over the vaccination directive, and that had some pieces related to exemptions. We were addressing those along as part and parcel with adding the vaccination related policies. And we borrowed these particular pieces relating to exemptions and some of the other language directly from recent amendments to the city of Issaquah policies, where they considered much the same issue. So it was more because we were already kind of into the topic that we took the occasion to do that here because of its relation to the others. But otherwise, you're correct. This is more of an example of day-to-day nuts and bolts administration things that the mayor would typically do without asking the council if you approve the delegation.
So my point of view, see what the other committee members think is, my point of view is I completely support the delegation. I think this is all the right direction. I agree with the other policy additions that are here. My point of view is we should take out this additional language just in section 1.3.2 because we should leave this to the mayor and the city administrator, and we do so in section 2 by delegating that authority. So, unless there's a different view, that would be what I would be in favor of. Let's take this occasion to keep the council focused where we need to be and appropriately delegate to the mayor and administration that which is in their area. So any different views, committee members, or is that something you support?
I agree.
Okay.
All right. Now, there's only one other question I have for you. If we could go back down to the end of that section 2, because I just, we got a very, very unexpected outcome from some language. And so I'm now very worried about language that we use. So at the very end of section 2, it has this wording, require approval by city council. And so I want to make sure that that doesn't mean that sort of we have a council meeting and sort of in staff report someone says, oh, and we're changing this, and that somehow, if we don't object, is somehow deemed as council approval, which was recently how something was handled in another matter. So I am feeling like this really needs, that this approval by city council is too vague. And I think it needs to specifically state that it will require amendment by city council resolution. I assume this is all happening in a resolution, or is this happening in an ordinance? This whole matter we're looking at.
This matter we're looking at right now is a resolution, which is how the prior iterations of the personnel policies have been adopted. And this language about requiring approval by the mayor and council appears in some of the existing policies that have to do with adding new positions or changing the classification of the employment and wage classification. And so I was just trying to borrow existing language. But as I said, certainly the committee and council can elaborate on it.
Well, let me ask this. If we merely added to the end of what's there, right before the period, if we just added the word resolution.
By resolution. Yep.
Or by resolution, I think if I understand your answer, that doesn't change the intent of what's written here. And so that would just be some clarifying language. Is there, am I understanding that correctly?
From my standpoint as the drafter, yeah, yes, you are
okay.
Correct.
So then if there's no objection or interest to see, let me say that differently. So committee members curious about your point of view, but I would favor adding the words by resolution at the end of the sentence there. Any different view, or is that, do you guys agree with that?
That's fine.
I'm good with the clarification.
All right, so those are all the questions I had. And again, I just want to say, I think this is just a fantastic step forward. I completely support this. This is something I this is a big step forward on things that we've been talking about for years. So I'm really pleased to see this this movement. So my own thought is that the adjustments we all just discussed are pretty straightforward. Committee members, do you feel like you want to see this come back to committee before it goes to full council, or are you happy with Mr. Sturbank just making those adjustments and then it going forward to council adjusted for the items of this discussion? What's your point of view?
I'm comfortable with going forward at this point.
Okay, Mr. Sturbank, are you comfortable with that approach?
Yeah, that's fine. I do have notes, and I'm sure I'll be backstopped by the city clerk on that, so it should be relatively straightforward for us to put those changes together and bring it to council.
All right, then if there's no objection, we'll take this item as amended for this discussion and approve it to go to the full council on the normal agenda with this committee's a recommendation for approval. Seeing no disagreement, it is so approved. All right. Moving on here. Resolution.
Apologies, Mr. Chair, I was just writing. Did you say just on the agenda or on consent?
No, on the regular agenda.
Regular agenda. All right, thank you.
I think it's an important thing for us to make sure the full council is on board and understanding what we're doing. And this is something that we've been heading for quite a while. So I think it's good to see it happening and good to make sure the full council's on board with what we're doing. Okay, Agenda Bill 22-080, staffing plan. These are this is going over some topics we've discussed before. I have a few comments, but first, committee members, any questions or comments from you?
I'd like to hear the discussion first.
All right. My questions, let's see. Figure out who I'm probably directing my questions to. Well, we'll see. I don't know that. So on this, if we could just go to the summary statement, I find some of the summary statements just sometimes a little bit awkward to read. My thought is, so first off, let me back up. I'm really pleased with this proposal and I completely support it. I think the staff and has taken our discussion points and come back with a well thought out proposal here. It appropriately focuses council at the budget and headcount level. And it identifies the ongoing costs that that are involved here and how those are addressed. I think that's exactly how something, especially mid-budget period, should work. And I just think it's just a fantastic implementation of that. Let's see, on the summary statement, just as I'm thinking about discussion at full council and that I intend to make, which are completely in support of this, I wonder if we could say the summary statement a little bit differently. I wonder if, I'm just looking at the background section where we say at the end of the first line there under background, address unforeseen staffing capacity challenges. I think that's what this is. So I think the summary statement could just be to address unforeseen staffing needs. I think that's what's happening here, and having it simple like that will help just focus the conversation at council. If there's no objection to that, I'd like to request that change.
No objection.
Okay. All right, and then So as I said, I completely support this, and I'm just really appreciate, this is a comment for staff and mayor, because this happened under your direction, is and city administrator, is you really took the discussion that we had previously. I really like that you've taken out a lot of the detail that I think council shouldn't be in. And you focus squarely on the issue, as I mentioned, which is budget and headcount and ongoing costs. So completely support this and really appreciate this what I think is a well thought out agenda bill. I will say I do still object to one thing, which is in one of the supporting memos. I know you took this out of the other supporting memo, and I agree with that, but I do object to the notion that's in the supporting memos that a department needs to find outside resources of funding for staffing needs. I don't think that is, I think that's a very unhealthy point of view. I think it's an unhealthy requirement. You know, the notion that, I mean, if we sort of take it to sort of an extreme, which happens around the country, you know, we might find the fire department holding car washes just to fund their staffing, or the police department think they should write more tickets in order to, you know, fund staffing positions. I just think that finding outside sources in order to fund staffing positions is I hate to see that in any of our documents. I don't think that should be a requirement on our departments. I, in fact, think it's squarely on the council to find the funding for staffing positions that are needed. But I do think that that's exactly, now finding the sources within the budget. So if we're going to trade off A for B, I do think that that's something that staff should come with. And that's exactly what I think you've done here. I just don't think it's good to have that other outside sources being part of the discussion. I think it's just a bad idea, but that's just my comment. For what it's worth, the agenda bill as written, I think I completely support. And so that if you would willing to make that one change to the summary statement, I support this. So committee members, any different points of view or additional comments?
The only thing I'd add is just that we talked about a fair bit the last meeting, and I'm in support of this as well. I think that the administrations have demonstrated that there's a need and that there's funds available to support.
Sorry, could you I just could barely hear you. I don't know if you're able to lean into the microphone a little.
So, sorry, I am leaning as best as I can, but I'm wearing a mask today. I was just saying that we had a chance to discuss both of these matters at the prior meeting. I appreciate staff fully breaking the issues, and I'm supportive of it going to council as well.
Okay, if there's no objection, we'll take this as modified and approve it for the upcoming council meeting on the regular agenda. Seeing no objection, it is so approved. All right, next item is Agenda Bill 22-074, excuse me, financial management policy. So we received now the proposed revised financial policies. So there's quite a bit to sort of absorb. I've had a chance to go through it once, need to go through it again in more detail. I think, I guess I was trying to think of the best way to kind of move through this, since there are a lot of changes, but many of them are more detail oriented, not necessarily each one needing a discussion at committee unless committee members feel differently. My thought was that perhaps we go through this, and between now and our next meeting, let the finance director know if we have any questions or comments, and then try to come to our next meeting ready to just discuss any specifics as, make a different change, make the change that's proposed, don't make the change that's proposed, but hopefully have that circulated by each of us in advance so we're ready to, rather than sort of going through each and every line item, or each and every change, just talk about those items that might require discussion. I don't know, committee members, did you like that approach or do you prefer a different approach? How would you like to go through this?
I agree. I prefer the opportunity to do some study and feedback.
Councilmember Christensen, is that okay with you?
I'm agreeable with that as well.
All right, so the thing I think we, as committee members, just to be sort of mindful of a process that doesn't stall out is, I think let's really commit to getting through everything and then trying to communicate on this between now and our next meeting, with really having the goal of trying to get through this to a resolution at our next meeting if possible, so it doesn't sort of stretch out. So kind of let's do our homework, so to speak, and then communicate with finance director so that hopefully we're ready to make decisions. Finance director, do you have any different thought? Do you need us to do something different tonight to support this effort?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't see any other different method for going through this. I appreciate your efforts to study further, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they do come up when you're going through the proposed policy versus the current policy. So I appreciate the approach. Thank you.
Okay, then that is, so we'll put this agenda bill onto our next committee meeting with that objective of being ready to hopefully move to action on it at committee level. All right, ERP update. I think I saw our ERP project leader in the attendees. I can find Ms. Reeder. Are you there?
Hello, I'm actually in the council chambers this evening.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, welcome, and how are we going?
Good. I'm going to start sharing here, so thank you all. So we're going to do our kind of June, May update. So right now, we're still in the first phase of the project. So we're focused on the chart of accounts, financials, and kind of our system-wide implementation of the basic technology. So right now for chart of accounts, which is the building blocks of the entire system, we have decided to push back the completion date to July to give the team enough time to really put together a strong, solid base and beginning. We are going through and doing a fourth iteration. So the goal is that we'll have our final draft into our test system by the end of this month, and then any last tweaks or things made in July before handing it over to production, which will then lead our way into actually being able to start implementing data for all the other financial modules. The other financial modules, we did start taking some of the initial training sessions in April. We made a decision with May, with the reporting that was due and the other obligations from the staffing and team, to actually push back training. We also had some issues with our Tyler consulting implementation consultant, which made some of the learning difficult. So we took May, gave the team time to get caught up, and we're going to be picking back up now in June. We actually had our first 2 sessions today. So these changes have led us to moving the project into an at-risk or yellow stage. I don't want anyone to freak out. I don't want anyone to get very concerned. This is more precautionary at this point in time. It's making sure we put some guardrails around this project so that we do not go off track. With all the changes made, we are still slated to complete on July 5th, the financial module of 2023. But we do not have any padding or excess time left in the project for major changes or issues to arise. So we want to go ahead, move this project to yellow, and then that'll input some mitigation steps. So just to give you an idea of really what brought some of this around. We had an implementation consultant, as I mentioned, who did not meet the needs of the city staff. They were very one-minded. They weren't able to adapt to our teaching and learning needs. And the company as a whole had some turnover and had some very inexperienced people doing their chart of accounts. We have since then required them to change out our implementation consultant. We have a wonderful person who has many years of experience. We've had a few meetings with her already, who is helping us finish out our chart of accounts. We've gotten support from our other consulting team, Very Done, to help us build and get up our first version ready to go. So we really do feel confident that we can finish this by July. The other pieces too is really just the staffing within the city and the requirements throughout the beginning of the year. Between the audit and then the financial reporting in May, and with down staff, people who were out with jury duty, just a bunch of different things, really put a lot of pressure on the team. So what this will mean is we are now being in yellow, there will be a couple steps that'll be brought in. That'll really require the steering committee or executive leadership within the city team, our finance director and our IT director, and then the city administrator to help us make any decisions if we need to make any other changes, because changes will require timing delays and more than likely monetary impact going forward. So if you look at the map there, we've added a little block of yellow that shows us where we've added those 2 months. We should have technically been completed in May, but we are picking up the May work now with the idea that we will be caught up in June. The other change we were able to make, or we made, is towards the end of the program as well. So we purchased what's called end user training from the company Tyler Units. They had thought they were training the entire city. We bought enough licenses to instruct the leadership within the city and not all the staff. So we moved up that training with them to allow all the leadership to have a month to train their staff before we go live. So it's another thing in revamping the schedule we were able to catch now that should not impact us down the road. So just as a reminder, give me 1 second, I keep getting to share my screen when I do this. I want to go over to So with the updating the dashboard, everyone now has access to this. We did take it offline briefly, so at the end of May, you did try to go out there and look at it. You would not have had access. As we were making the changes to the calendar, we wanted to ensure that everything was up to date and explained before we allowed everyone how to access it again. There's also some new features that kind of explain the different steps, kind of give a criteria overview of why they're there, what's done, what's completed. Explanation, again, litigation in the phase and what we're doing. And then some move on a little bit more in depth without having to go dive into the project plan. There are actually lists of tasks and things that we've changed that pop up right there for you. Notes on why we're doing, what we were doing, why it happened, are all right there for you to read and review as well. And then the remaining pieces are the milestones and project plans, which were there previously. Questions?
Committee members, any questions or comments?
Not at this time.
Oh, shoot.
I just, my one question for you, Ms. Reader, is so if, so we've got sort of a little bit of a push there. If we don't make up that time, what would be the impact? Does that just mean sort of a later go live date, or does it mean there would be some cost to sort of bring in some help to get us back on schedule, or kind of what are the possible ways this could play out? And what I'm really trying to get at is if we need to be thinking about, you know, any additional resources that might need to be available, or if it's a timeline thing, if there's any implications to coming online a little bit later than your targeted go live. So just sort of trying to figure out what the implications are so that we're prepared to support that however we need to at a council level.
So right now, there really aren't any additional implications with the changes we've made today. It would be future changes. One of the things we have started doing is we are bringing in some additional staff, both right now on the finance side. They've brought a couple of people in. We're starting on Monday on the IT side, bringing in an individual who'll be able to help us with the database analysis. So that'll bring us forward a little bit too. But there are a lot of different factors that could impact down the road. From a go live date, yes, it could just be as simple as, we were going to go live in July and now we're going to go live in August. Where financial impact is coming with that though is Tyler has dates and schedules we paid for with them already. So if they don't have someone who's available or cannot move, then we may have to pay to have somebody else come in, or there may be a part of the contract we have to change. So that's where you're looking at that. And there could be an additional cost if there is something where we have to bring in another specialty that we aren't aware of, or someone else to back up someone who just the workload is too much. One of the big things to think about too is we have the payroll and HR module starting in October of this year. So what that means is I have individuals who are in the finance department today who are doing accounts receivable, accounts payable, writing checks, all of the finance stuff. We're also not going to be involved in payroll. So it could be that they can't be in two places at one time. So we may need to look at bringing in additional staff or something like that.
Okay, so there's some various ways this could play out. At this point, you're not raising any of those. You're just saying, hey, there's an at-risk here, but we're managing through it at this point. And that's kind of the current status, yeah?
Yes, I never want to come and say we have a problem and you guys go, why didn't you tell us they're relating to it? So.
We appreciate that very much. Yes, and then we react as sort of being difficult as a result of that. So keeping us informed is fantastic. I'm just curious, do you or city administrator or mayor have any view? Do you think we should let the full council know at this point? My sense is maybe not, but do you have any view that the full council should be made aware of this, or what's your point of view?
Well, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. I would concur with the Mayor Pro Tem that, first of all, there's council members on this call right now, and they can certainly discuss it with each other. But, it may be helpful at some point this fall to just give a full council update on what our progress has been. I mean, this is a big project. It's a big multi-year project. And, while I appreciate talking with the committee about it, it may be a good idea to give the council a full update at some point.
So with that in mind, what would you think if potentially just during committee reports, I briefly mention that the project, I'll double back and get Ms. Reeder's language, but basically some of the timing is slightly at risk, but at this point looks like it'll be managed through, and that in the future a broader update on the project status will come to the council. Would that be perhaps a good way to handle it at this point?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as a practical matter, we can have Sarah available at the next council meeting if anybody has specific questions.
Tell you what, because I hate dragging staff in if we don't know we need them. How about I make that just that brief update, and if there are questions from the council, then we can ask her to come at a future meeting where we know we would actually need her, rather than having her spend time when we're not sure we'd need it. My sense is the council will probably just appreciate knowing that this committee is monitoring it, and I doubt they'll have any further questions that would require her. Would that be okay with you?
I think that's great.
Okay, super. Any other comments or questions, committee members? All right, Ms. Reeder, thank you for the update, and good luck with managing the at-risk.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Oops, no. Okay. ARPA funds update. So I see that on the full council agenda, there'll be something on some ARPA funds. I wonder, what I wanted to raise here was, I have the idea that the full amount of ARPA funding is something that isn't yet being discussed or isn't being discussed separately. So being in June, I thought sort of maybe beginning a discussion. Most councils in most cities are involved with kind of setting the policies, the priorities for how we're broadly going to spend ARPA funds. And we haven't really gotten into that discussion yet. And I thought maybe it was time that council should start engaging that discussion, but just wanted to raise the topic and see what the thoughts are, what committee members' thoughts are in that regard.
Well, no, I mean, there are those funds out there. We ought to start talking about what are we going to do with those. I think we have that the initial allocation of the ARPA fund allocation stuff conversations going and coming to a conclusion here, I assume, in near term. So yeah, it's the next progression of what do we do with the rest of that and the future stuff.
Yeah, so I wonder sort of what the best way to sort of go into that. And Mayor, I haven't had a chance to talk with you about this, but I wonder, I know that, or I'm sure that administration is thinking through kind of different priorities or different ideas of how to use that money. What is your thought of maybe the best way that council could sort of engage in this discussion? We could start with council just starting to discuss priorities. We could start with maybe thoughts that administration already has in regard to how those would be spent. Kind of what would be a good way for council to sort of engage and get on board with some view of how we spend the rest of that money. And sorry, if you want to think about that and come back to us, we don't have to decide tonight. I just wanted to open a discussion. So it may be that an answer is something we talk about in 2 weeks. I just want to sort of open a discussion around it.
I think there's some basic things that it could apply to, such as right now we're funding our ARPA coordinator out of it. We need to do AV upgrades for the council chambers, because now we're able to do hybrid meetings as a result of COVID. And we're also looking at public safety, like cameras and things for police, fire, and other areas. And there's components that they're recommending, like the niche tranche would be something to do with perhaps good health outcomes, which could be public safety, which could be recreation facilities, affordable housing, or we've been also looking at some of it to backfill what our general operating looks like for the next 4 years as well. So I think there's opportunities we can look at. But I think we also base it on some of the council priorities that you guys have been working on as well.
Right. So how would it make sense then to have perhaps at an upcoming meeting, maybe a section of the council meeting or a roundtable meeting to sort of start talking about sort of big picture? Here's kind of some of the things that could be spent on, and kind of here's sort of some priorities that being assigned, or what would be the best way to start that discussion at the council level?
We do have a roundtable coming up, actually, is talk about council priorities, and from that we can build, what do we want some of our funds then to go towards. I also have our financial analyst, Routine here, who's jumping in a bit to have a couple of comments as well.
No, I think the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem collectively are correct. I think it's proper to start with a background or an environmental scan about how we could essentially use this funds, really recalling upon the U.S. Treasury rule, for example, I don't think necessarily the council knows, but there is a replace lost public sector revenue eligible use category, which means we can use those funds to support government services. And so just kind of broadly going over the definition, and it's very broad. What is government services and how can we apply this money to that? I kind of think of this much like a kind of a plate of food, for example, where we've allocated, I believe, roughly about 25% towards the business community outside groups. We've also kind of contemplated as a part of the financial forecast that we provided at the retreats, roughly using about half of those funds towards supporting us over this kind of 3 to 4 year period to get us to about 2025 when we need to, as part of the financial forecast, kind of really consider how are we going to make sure that our revenues align with expenditures over time. So that leaves roughly the other 25% or so, roughly $950,000 to kind of consider what the mayor was discussing. And so I think it would be prudent for us to kind of explore what that background looks like, maybe how we would involve the current ARPA committee in that process, but then also work administratively internally to maybe provide some recommendations for how we use those funds. And so the mayor suggested a few of those potential options in front of us too. And so a lot more exploration needs to take place, but I think the background would be appropriate. So thank you.
So maybe, Mayor, would it make sense, perhaps we ask, we sort of head towards some initial briefing, I'll just use that word. We can figure out what exactly goes into that, but something along the lines of some combination of what Mr. Boutte was saying and what you were saying, sort of an initial discussion or briefing or however we want to sort of label it, but maybe not for this coming council meeting, but maybe for the following council meeting. And that would give time, maybe in 2 weeks when this committee meets, we could just sort of discuss an item that would then go on the subsequent council agenda. And that'll give you guys time to sort of think about, what would that briefing be, and sort of come back and say, okay, we're going to do a briefing that's like this, and we'll need 30 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour or what, just give you a chance to sort of come back and tell us, here's what we want to do to start the conversation. Is that, and so we start hopefully for the council meeting, not the coming one, but the following one, and then just have a further discussion of this in 2 weeks at this committee. How would that work?
So I'm not understanding briefing versus recommendation. So maybe we can have the discussion, the ARPA committee that meets on Thursdays as to what you guys want to see.
Well, we're talking about $4 million. So I think this secret committee that isn't a committee because it was never approved by the council, I think this is not the way to go through $4 million of ARPA funding. We need to have, just like this committee meets in public, I think we need to have public meetings, and we need to have the full council involved in setting the priorities. So I just want to get a discussion going where kind of the council gets on board with the priorities, and that's sort of done in a public way in advance of, I think asking the administration to come forward with a full proposal for the 4 million before any sort of discussion of priorities and so on. I think it's a setup of the administration. I don't think that's fair. I think council should engage in some of the discussion of priorities so that by the time administration is bringing a proposal that, we're pretty sure we're all on board with the priorities that'll be in it, is part of my thinking.
Chair,
Councilor Holloway.
I take issue with calling the present ARPA committee a secret non-committee. Believe you second the motion and resulted in its creation. We may not all be in agreement of exactly how it came to form, but it is in place and active.
It doesn't meet in public, Councilor Holloway.
It is
Like this committee meets in public as we're meeting now. That committee doesn't meet in public, and it's $4 million.
No, that committee is focused not on the 4 million, but on going through the allocation of monies to the business and charitable organizations. Okay. That was the focus of it out of that agenda bill. So again, that was done out of council. That is not a secret skullduggery committee. I object to the characterization of it as that.
Okay, so to be clear, then you want that committee to just carry on with the whole 4 million?
Nope.
Okay, so
I
the
was
thing I'm
merely
objecting-
pointing out the characterization of that committee by the committee chair here tonight. I, in my own opinion, think we ought to charter something different to address the 4 million. It may be the same members, different members, but that was an ad hoc committee focused strictly on the items of that agenda bill that night.
I'm not trying to rehash that. I'm trying to say that this is no way to move forward with 4 million, having meetings that aren't public. That's all I'm trying to say.
Disagree that there aren't public meetings, but go on.
Maybe I'm mistaken. Are those meetings of that group open to the public?
There's no restriction of that. It is a council committee and it is noticed appropriately. But I do not want to get into a discussion of that committee. I merely point out characterization of that committee as secret and whatever is inappropriate. I do think we should get into a discussion of what do we do with the remainder of the $4 million?
Yeah, so your comments are noted. What is your thought on the remainder of the 4 million?
I would like first the discussion, kind of the backdrop discussion that Drew was talking about of, where are we? And then what is the current landscape out of the federal government of what are the possibilities? From there, we probably ought to get into a discussion of, is this another ad hoc committee to go and drive that? Or are we going to do that through one of the existing committees? And we ought to make the decision and make motions appropriate to do that.
So do you support the idea of then something along the lines of what I suggested, which is something at the council meeting, not the coming one, but the following one, to start a discussion in that regard?
If administration is in support, you mentioned it, I am in support of the direction. The timing, if administration is in support of the timing, I got no argument.
Mayor, I see you've got your hand raised. Sorry.
I'll get back to the briefing. So are you looking for information from the treasury rule, the final rule on different things that we could invest in? Is that what you're stating?
Well, I think that would be fine. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just getting confused on what the briefing, what it is you're looking for in a briefing versus council priorities and discussion on how we spend it.
Right. Well, council priorities would be for the whole city. This is for ARPA funds, which is a very different matter, very specific. And yeah, the one influences the other. So I take your point. What I was really wanting is to open a conversation at council on broadly the use of that 4 million or so. I believe that's our estimate over the couple of years of how we would spend that money. And I think starting with, and so I'm sort of open as to where you all think that, a good way to start that discussion or open that discussion would be. So talking about what it possibly can be used for seems very appropriate. If you want to bring in some discussion of sort of priorities that are suggested, that's appropriate. I didn't want, though, for you to feel like you needed to have a specific proposal before you came forward. I think that's unfair to ask you to do. And I think it's fair that the council should get on board with priorities that you're intending to use in developing that. So it's really just to open a discussion to try and get that, start driving council towards some common view with administration on how we might use this money. So my suggestion is intentionally kind of vague so that I don't want to specify how that conversation should go. I think if I understood Councilmember Holloway correctly, he's also sort of saying, well, tell us what you guys would like to have, how that conversation could go, and sort of defer to you on what you're ready to do and what would make sense as to how to tee that up. And so the idea would be give you 2 weeks here. Maybe we come back and talk about it, this committee in 2 weeks, how you'd like to go forward. And then we can just talk then about, with an idea that the following council meeting would be where we'd have some initial briefing or discussion or whatever makes sense that you would bring to us. So basically give you a couple of weeks to think it through and tell us what you think would be useful. Does that make sense?
I'm just gonna
Committee
ask,
members? Oh,
in terms of the second tranche of funds, do we have any indication on what that will look like? Is it just the general topic, or do we know when the rules on that funding would come out?
So the same treasury rule should apply to the second tranche of the funds. Yes, yeah, and we should hopefully receive that by the end of the month, so.
But they came out with guidance on what they were hoping that the second tranche would be used for, so. Bring it forward too. Thank you.
yeah, Mayor, I think getting us sort of educated as to all of what you were just referring to is kind of my goal is, you know, start getting us kind of up to speed and on board, and then involved, if you will, in kind of buying off on priorities that are being used and so forth.
Right, okay.
Okay. All right, committee members, any further discussion on that topic? All right, moving on to agenda review. To start with the June 9th CIP open house. Any questions or comments on that? If not, let's see, so we'll approve. So actually, does the full council need to approve this agenda? I don't think they do until the meeting itself. But there's no action. Anyway, assuming that the committee can just approve this, committee members, if there's no objection, we'll approve this agenda. Hearing no objection, agenda so approved. What's the next one? June 13th, special and regular city council meeting. So the roundtable is, we'll come back to that. Let's go on to the regular meeting. Go and scroll down. So we've got, so I noticed that on almost everything, there's no longer a recommended action, which I think is good because these confuse me. Can we remove the recommended action on the minutes and the warrants as well? It's already on a consent agenda. City Clerk Estrada, are you there?
I'm here, I can adjust the agenda. However, the committee or council would like.
So specifically, Chair, you're asking under agenda item number 1 minutes, that the recommended action there of approving the minutes be taken off and it just list out the minutes from May 23rd council meeting.
Yeah, same on item 2. We don't
Yeah.
list recommended action anywhere else. I don't think it's needed. So just remove those 2 items and then that's consistent with the rest of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, normally I would have a recommended action under each one of those items. This agenda, preparing this particular agenda was problematic on Friday. And so the recommended action was left off unintentionally, but if it's a desire of the committee that I remove all references to recommended action on the agenda, we can do that.
So let me, I guess I've been confused by recommended actions. I don't know who's making the recommendation. Is it a staff recommendation or is it a committee recommendation or what is it meant to refer to?
It's recommended action by staff or committee for council to take at the council meeting. If there's a different, I've seen it used different ways with different councils over the years, so it can change from council to council in the same city. So if there's a desire to change the wording in such a way that better suits the current seating of this council, I'm happy to do that.
Well, committee members don't know what you think. I don't find that helpful there. There are recommendations in the staff reports, and I think I find this confusing. I'd just as soon not have recommended actions unless you feel differently, committee members.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add one more comment, and I don't know if it'll add any more to this discussion. I guess, well, two questions. One, is it your desire to remove recommended action just from the consent agenda or from consent agenda committee reports, basically anything that's on the agenda? The reason why I say that is, again, in my past experience, one of the reasons why there is a recommended action or proposed action on the agenda is for the public to understand what action might be taken by council at the meeting, or what is the proposed action that they might be taking. So it's used as an information tool with the public.
I also think that it can be helpful to the extent that something's put on the.
Sorry, who's speaking?
Apologies, this is Councilmember Christensen.
Oh, Councilmember Christensen, go ahead.
I was just saying, furthermore, it can be helpful to have a recommended action on there if we know where it's coming from. In the event that we have an item that's being put forward on the council agenda without a recommendation, it may make, although it wouldn't appear on the consent agenda, it just may flag the issue to the other council members that it was not put forth with a recommended action taken, that it's recommended for passage.
So your point of view would be, Councilmember Christensen, if I'm understanding it correctly, is we maybe include recommended action, but it would be the recommendation of the committee that's forwarded through. Is that right?
That may be something that's helpful if we identify whether it's being recommended by the administration or by the council committee. And just in the past, I've seen matters that were being put forth to council, I think it was actually from FNA, where we didn't necessarily recommend the action be taken.
Right, because sometimes things will get forward without recommendation, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I understand.
In that case, it may be
Councilmember, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, in that case, it may be helpful as well.
Understand. Councilmember Holloway.
So I guess I agree with Councilman Christian's statements. Case in point, I think Agenda Bill 084, it's coming off the agenda. If it remained on the agenda, I would have requested to have a recommended action of denial. But you know, we work through that committee. We're working for look at the options and go forward. So I'm not sure. I would split a hair though. I don't think on consent agenda, because it's pretty well stated or assumed, I guess. The recommended action is that the consent agenda in its entirety gets approved. I think on the committee reports, there should be a recommended action.
On the agenda bills and the committee reports, yeah.
Yeah.
Councilmember Christensen, does that fit with your thinking as well?
Yes, it does.
So Clerk Estrada, and I concur with that. So Clerk Estrada, how about we don't have recommended actions on the consent agenda, and then we have recommended actions on agenda bills under committee reports, but they would be the committee's recommendation or lack thereof that would be indicated there. Does that make sense?
Can I modify?
Yes, but let me just start. Clerk Estrada, did that make sense so far?
I understand what you want for the consent agenda. I think I need a little bit more clarification on the committee reports. Is there a desire to amend the agenda bill itself so that instead of it saying recommended action, it says committee's recommended action or no recommended action? Or is it just the desire to change the agenda itself to reflect the outcome of the committee?
So let me get to Councilmember Holloway. My thought is that we would only change the agenda. We're not talking about changing anything on the agenda bills. Councilmember Holloway, what was your item?
So I just wanted to leave open that where we have recommended action on the committee reports and agenda bills, that it is the consensus recommendation of the committee. If in cases where it is not, you may list out two recommended actions, one of the committee and one of the administration, where they conflict. There have been occasions in the past where they have. So I don't want to, or mark it as no consensus on recommendation. So we'll have to discuss how to work the non-consent recommendation.
Okay, so let me see if I got this right. So the recommendation under committee report section would be the committee recommendation. And in cases where the committee recommendation was different than administration or the mayor's recommendation, then, or staff recommendation, however we want to tee that up, that then both recommendations would be listed in that case, and labeled as committee recommendation X and staff recommendation Y. Is that what you're thinking?
I would put it as administration recommendation Y. I don't want to perceive that the staff is making a recommendation outside of elected officials.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't like the way that sounded either when I said it.
We might be better off if they did, but they shouldn't.
So Clerk Estrada, does that work?
I think I understand what you're looking for, and where the agenda is concerned, we still have the agenda bill. Maybe it makes sense, rather than it saying recommended action on the agenda bill, should it maybe say proposed action? And then there could be a statement underneath that that says committee defines whether or not it's committee recommendation, or basically what I'm saying, Chair, is that I'm working with a template, and we're moving towards an agenda management system that will have these templates in place. And I don't want something to get lost in the communication on this. I want to make sure we're capturing exactly what the committee and the council want to see. So maybe if the committee could work with me, and I'll put together some options, and,
Yeah.
and we can vet that. I just feel like we need a little bit more discussion on this before we land it completely.
That sounds great. And I really appreciated the wording suggestion you just made. I've been uncomfortable with the wording and what you just, that's being used, and the wording you just proposed addresses most, if not all, of the concern I've had. So I think this is great. So then why don't we do this for this agenda, for the agenda bills that are there. So no recommended action under consent agenda. And on all the others, put in the recommended action that was recommended by the committee, because we know that we don't have any disagreements on any of those. And then for our next meeting, you could come back and tell us kind of your proposal of or options on how to sort of resolve this long term. Does that sound all right?
I think, yes, definitely.
Committee members, any different thought? Did I get that right?
Good to go.
Sounds good.
Okay, super. All right. Let's move on.
Oh, wait a minute, Chair.
Oh, yes.
So Agenda Bill 22084 was pulled. So that'll go back to committee in 2 weeks. And Agenda Bill 22086 under Parks and Public Works was recommended to be under consent agenda.
Okay. All right. Any other changes or additions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, did you want to go back to the special?
Oh, yeah, I did. So, yeah, I just have a question. in our council rules of procedure, we call this a roundtable. And I know that this is labeled this way because of some concerns the city attorney has, which is fine. Can we label this a roundtable special? Like, is there a way to cover both of these so that we call this a roundtable special meeting? So we call it a roundtable, which is what our council rules of procedure call it, and then add the legal term notification wording to make it compliant with the legal concern. Is that possible?
Yeah, you can certainly label it as also a roundtable, because that speaks to the format in which you're conducting the meeting. Typically, the council's holding roundtables on the same day that it holds regular meetings, and so it tends to fall under the regular meeting rubric rather than a special meeting. This is on a Thursday, not on a, second and fourth Monday of the month, hence the special meeting nomenclature. But there's certainly nothing wrong with adding and the label that it'll be conducted as a roundtable.
All right, so if we could, is there any objection, committee members, to just adding that language? All right.
No objection.
Councilmember Christensen, you okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay, then if Clerk Estrada, if you would just make that adjustment, and if you need any specific information as to how to put that in there, just I think just consult with city attorney, and he can just tell you what he was thinking there about how to just add that in. Would that be all right?
That would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next item is June 14th, special city council meeting. This is where we're going to get trained on how to follow the rules. Any comments or questions regarding this agenda? If not, then if there's no objection, we'll approve this meeting agenda as well. Hearing no objection, it's so approved. Okay, I think we have come to the end of our agenda tonight. Is there any other items for discussion? If not, then if there are no objections, we will adjourn. Hearing no objections, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.